Dominic Reinhardt stood in the doorway of his home, watching the police cruiser pull away. The call had come an hour earlier while he was reviewing blueprints for the Richardson estate, a $20 million project that would cement his architectural firm's reputation in Newport. Peace called me at my office. "Sir, you need to come to your address." "There's been an incident," he recounted to himself, still trying to process what was happening. The officer's voice had been professionally flat, revealing nothing. Dominic had cancelled his meetings and driven home in a fog of anxiety, his mind racing through possibilities: a break-in, an accident, something happening to Victoria, now stepping into his own foyer. The atmosphere was thick with tension. Victoria sat on the edge of the sofa, mascara streaking down her reddened face. Her shoulders shook with each stifled sob. His parents, who had been visiting from Chicago, stood awkwardly by the fireplace. His mother wrung her hands while his father, a retired military officer who'd never shown vulnerability in his life, looked ashen. Dominic found his wife crying, his parents looking grim. His father gripped his arm tightly. "Son. She didn't mean for it to go this far." Dominic pulled away from his father's grasp. "What's going on? What happened?" Victoria looked up, her eyes wide with panic. "Please, Dom, I can explain everything," his wife whimpered. "Don't let him see the garage." But Dominic was already moving, pushing past his mother's outstretched hand. The 3-car garage had been his pride: custom cabinetry, epoxy floors, a workspace where he built scale models of his designs. Something in Victoria's voice, a note of desperation he'd never heard before, propelled him forward. He shoved the door open, and then discovered the shocking truth. The garage was in shambles. His workbench had been cleared with violent force, architectural models shattered across the floor. But that wasn't what made Dominic freeze in the doorway. On the far wall, where his design awards had once hung, someone had mounted dozens of photographs. Pictures of Victoria with a man Dominic recognized immediately: Bradley Winters, his childhood friend and business partner. The images chronicled an affair that had apparently been going on for years. Intimate dinner dates while Dominic worked late. Weekend trips Victoria had claimed were girls' getaways. Even photos taken inside their home, in their bed, when Dominic had been out of town pitching to clients. But what truly struck Dominic cold wasn't the affair itself, it was what surrounded the photos. Printouts of architectural designs, not just any designs, but the revolutionary sustainable high-rise concept that was supposed to be Dominic's magnum opus, his ticket to international recognition. The designs he'd been perfecting for 3 years, confiding only in those closest to him. Pinned beside them were emails between Victoria and Bradley, discussing how to best steal the concept, file patents under Bradley's name, and present it to Archer Development Group, the most prestigious commercial developer in the country. "They were going to steal my life's work," Dominic whispered. His mother stepped up behind him. "The neighbors called the police because they heard the crashing. Victoria was destroying things after she and Bradley had a fight. Apparently, he's backing out of their plan. Wants to reconcile with you." She didn't take it well. Dominic turned slowly, his expression unnervingly calm. Victoria stepped backward, recognizing something new and dangerous in her husband's eyes. "Dominic, please," she pleaded. "It was Bradley's idea. He said you were holding us back, that we could be so much more without you." Dominic surveyed the wreckage of his workspace, the shattered models representing years of creativity and precision. Then his gaze settled back on Victoria, the woman he'd loved since college, who had apparently been plotting his professional destruction with his oldest friend. "Get out," he said quietly. "Dom, get out." His voice remained low but carried a steel edge that silenced everyone in the room. "You have 30 minutes to pack essentials. Anything you leave behind becomes mine." Victoria fled upstairs. His parents exchanged worried glances. "Son," his father began cautiously. "What are you going to do?" Dominic's face was expressionless as he carefully picked up a fragment of his favorite model, a sustainable community center he designed for an impoverished neighborhood pro bono. "I'm going to do what I've always done," he replied, softly, I'm going to design something perfect. His father frowned. You mean a new life? A divorce settlement? Dominic placed the fragment precisely on the workbench. No, I mean I'm going to design their downfall. And unlike them, I'll ensure it's constructed exactly to specification. 3 months passed with the mechanical precision of a Swiss timepiece. Dominic filed for divorce, but didn't push for a quick resolution. He took a leave of absence from the firm, citing personal reasons which Bradley accepted with feigned sympathy and secretly triumphant eyes. What the conspirators didn't know was that Dominic had photographed everything in the garage before Victoria cleared it out. The evidence of their betrayal, both personal and professional, was securely stored. But Dominic had no intention of using it conventionally. They expect me to expose them, he confided to Naomi Phillips, an investigative journalist he'd met years earlier at an industry function. They sat in a quiet corner of a dingy bar far from his usual upscale haunts. Bradley knows I have enough to destroy his reputation and career. He's waiting for me to make a move so he can counter it. Naomi sipped her bourbon. So, you're not going to play the game they're expecting? No. I'm going to invert their expectations completely. His plan was already in motion. Step 1. He contacted Archer Development Group, offering to design their newest high-rise project for a fraction of the industry standard fee he knew. Bradley had scheduled a presentation of his revolutionary design for the following month. Dominic needed to move first. Mr. Reinhardt, said Lenora Archer, granddaughter of the founder and current CEO, studying him across her immaculate desk. Your proposal is surprisingly modest for someone of your caliber. I have to wonder, why? Dominic smiled with practiced charm. I've reached a point in my career where I want to build a legacy. Ms. Archer, your company shares my vision for sustainable urbanism. Money is secondary to creating something that will change skylines and lives. She seemed satisfied, if slightly suspicious. And your partner, Mr. Winters, will he be involved? Bradley and I are taking different paths, Dominic replied smoothly. Creative differences. What Dominic didn't mention was that he had deliberately designed a proposal incorporating subtle elements of Bradley's previous work, enough so that when Bradley presented his revolutionary design, it would appear Bradley had stolen the concept from Dominic, not the other way around. Step 2 involved Victoria. She had moved in with Bradley after the separation, but their relationship was already showing cracks. Bradley had expected to step seamlessly into Dominic's professional shoes. But without Dominic's industry connections and reputation, doors were closing. Victoria was beginning to realize that the life she'd envisioned, the successful architect's companion with unlimited resources, wasn't materializing. Dominic orchestrated an accidental meeting with her. At the cafe they once frequented every Sunday. He appeared tired but composed, distracted by work on his tablet. Victoria said, hovering uncertainly by his table. I didn't expect to see you here. He looked up with mild surprise. Victoria, please sit if you'd like. She hesitated, then slid into the chair opposite him. How are you busy? The Archer project is all-consuming. He deliberately let that nugget drop, watching her eyes widen. You're working with Archer Development. But Bradley said. Dominic shrugged. Life moves on. How are things with you and Bradley? She glanced down at her coffee. Fine, good, we're adjusting. I'm glad, Dominic lied flawlessly. Despite everything, I want you both to be happy. Victoria studied his face for deception and found none. Dominic had spent weeks perfecting this mask of benign acceptance. It was the last thing she expected, and it thoroughly unsettled her. Why aren't you angry? She finally asked. You should. Hate us. Dominic allowed a small, sad smile. Hatred requires emotional investment. I've moved that investment elsewhere. It was perfectly calculated to wound her vanity, to suggest she mattered so little that he couldn't even summon hatred. He watched the barb sink in before gathering his things. I should go. Take care, Victoria. The seeds of doubt had been planted. Victoria would return to Bradley with questions about the Archer project. creating the first crack in their alliance. Step 3 was more elaborate. Through Naomi's connections, Dominic arranged for an industry blog to publish an insider tip that Bradley Winters was developing a revolutionary sustainability concept for high-rises. The article was vague but enthusiastic, suggesting that Bradley's presentation to Archer Development would be a game-changer. On the day of Bradley's presentation, Dominic sat calmly in his apartment, waiting. The call came from Lenora Archer herself. "Mr. Reinhardt, I believe we need to have a conversation about intellectual property." "I'm not sure I understand," he replied with practiced confusion. "Your former partner just presented us with designs that bear a striking resemblance to concepts you showed us last month, except he's claiming they're entirely his work developed over the past 3 years." Dominic allowed a pause as if processing this information. "That's disturbing. What are you suggesting?" "I'm not suggesting anything yet, but I value integrity above all else. Mr. Reinhardt, I'd like you to come in tomorrow to discuss this situation." After hanging up, Dominic poured himself a single-finger scotch. Everything was proceeding according to design. Bradley had walked directly into the trap, positioning himself as the thief of Dominic's work, rather than the other way around, but the true masterstroke was yet to come. The following day, instead of defending himself to Archer, Dominic would present evidence that appeared to exonerate Bradley, creating confusion about who had stolen from whom. The uncertainty would cause both Archer Development and other potential clients to distance themselves from both architects, unwilling to risk association until the truth emerged. And while their professional reputations hung in limbo, Dominic would implement the fourth and most devastating step of his plan. The conference room at Archer Development felt like a courtroom, with Lenora Archer as judge and Bradley Winters sweating in the defendant's chair. Victoria sat behind him, her face a mask of practiced support that couldn't quite hide her growing doubts. Dominic entered last. Nodding respectfully to everyone, he carried no papers, no evidence, nothing to suggest he came prepared for a fight. "Mr. Reinhardt," Lenora began, "thank you for joining us. We find ourselves in an unusual situation." "Indeed," Dominic agreed. "Though perhaps not as unusual as you might think. Bradley and I collaborated on sustainability concepts for years. Cross-pollination of ideas is inevitable between partners." Bradley's head snapped up in surprise. This was not the accusation he'd expected. "So, you're saying you don't believe Mr. Winters stole your work?" Lenora asked carefully. Dominic shrugged. "I'm saying creative collaboration is complex. I've known Bradley since we were boys. His integrity isn't something I'd question lightly." The tension in the room shifted perceptibly. Bradley's relief was palpable but cautious. "Then, how do you explain the similarities in your presentations?" Lenora pressed. "I imagine we drew from the same well of shared research and discussions." Dominic smiled at Bradley with practiced warmth. "Perhaps in the emotional fallout of our personal situations, there was simply a misunderstanding about who developed which elements." Victoria stared at Dominic, clearly bewildered by his apparent magnanimity. This was the moment Dominic had designed for creating total confusion about his intentions. "If I may," he continued, addressing Lenora directly, "I'd actually like to propose something unconventional. Rather than allowing this situation to damage to careers and potentially delay an important project, what if Bradley and I collaborated one final time? A joint proposal that incorporates the best of both our visions." The room fell. Silent. Bradley's expression cycled rapidly between suspicion, calculation, and tentative hope. "That's generous," Lenora said cautiously. "It's practical," Dominic corrected. "The project matters more than our egos." As the meeting concluded with tentative agreement to explore this possibility, Bradley approached Dominic in the hallway. Victoria hovered uncertainly nearby. "What are you doing?" Bradley demanded, in a harsh whisper. "This isn't like you, Dom. You never share credit." Dominic smiled. "People change. Perspectives shift. Isn't that what you always said I needed to do?" Bradley searched his face for deception and found none because Dominic had become a perfect architect of facades. "We'll need to meet to discuss the collaboration." Dominic continued smoothly. My place tonight at 8, we can start fresh. Bradley hesitated, then nodded. Victoria said nothing. But the confusion in her eyes told Dominic she was beginning to suspect that his calm acceptance concealed something far more complex. That evening, Dominic prepared his apartment meticulously. Wine was uncorked to breathe. Files were arranged on his coffee table. Music played softly through hidden speakers. When his doorbell rang precisely at 8, he took a deep breath and opened it to find not just Bradley, but Victoria as well. I hope you don't mind, Bradley said stiffly. Victoria has some insights on the sustainability metrics that might be valuable. It was a transparent excuse. Bradley had brought her as a buffer. Sensing something off about Dominic's sudden cooperative spirit, of course, Dominic stepped aside. Please make yourselves comfortable. As they settled awkwardly in his living room, Dominic poured wine and passed out folders containing preliminary sketches for the joint project. What neither of them knew was that each folder also contained a small, nearly undetectable thumb drive. Embedded in the spine. Before we begin, Dominic said, raising his glass in a toast to new beginnings and old friendships. They drank uneasily. Dominic set his glass down and leaned forward. Now, let's discuss the real reason we're here. The atmosphere shifted instantly. Bradley tensed while Victoria clutched her wine glass tighter. Those drives in your folders contain everything, Dominic continued conversationally. The original plans you stole, your emails discussing how to cut me out of my own work, photos of your affair going back to years, but more importantly, he added, they contain evidence of something I discovered during my investigation. Bradley's face hardened. What game are you playing, Dom? Not a game, a reckoning. Dominic smiled pleasantly. Did you know that the Peterson Heights project, the one that launched our firm, had serious structural flaws? Bradley's face drained of color. That's absurd. The building passed every inspection. Because you falsified data, Dominic replied calmly. I found the original calculations when I was going through our archive files. You adjusted the numbers to meet code without actually implementing the necessary structural supports. The building is slowly failing, Bradley. Those hairline cracks in the foundation that the maintenance team reported last year, they're just the beginning. Victoria looked between them, her composure cracking. Bradley, is this true? Bradley's silence was damning. 400 people live in that building, Dominic continued. Families, children, and you knowingly put them at risk to save what? 8% of the budget, which coincidentally matches the amount you siphoned into your personal offshore account that same month. You can't prove any of this, Bradley finally said, though his voice lacked conviction. I already have. Dominic gestured to the folders. Everything's there, including communications with the district attorney. They're very interested in cases of criminal negligence and fraud in the construction industry. Bradley lunged across the table, grabbing Dominic's collar. You sanctimonious bastard, you destroy everything we built over one mistake. Dominic didn't resist, just looked calmly into the eyes of the man who had once been his closest friend. No, Bradley. You destroyed everything the moment you decided my life's work and my marriage were things you could steal. Victoria was openly crying now. Dominic, please think about what this will do to everyone involved. There must be another way. There is, Dominic agreed, gently removing Bradley's hands from his shirt. On those drives, you'll also find a contract. Bradley transfers all his shares in our firm to me, making a full confession about the stolen designs but admitting no criminal liability for Peterson Heights. In exchange, I ensure the building is properly reinforced before any failure occurs, at my own expense. And if we refuse, Bradley asked, then I send everything to the authorities, the media, and the residents of Peterson Heights. Dominic's voice remained calm, almost gentle. You go to prison for criminal negligence and fraud. Victoria loses everything in the divorce when your joint assets are seized. And 400 innocent people learn they've been living in a death trap. The silence that followed was absolute. Victoria stared at the folder in her hands as if it might explode. Bradley's breathing was rapid. His composure shattered. "You've always been thorough, Dom," Bradley finally said, his voice hollow. "But I never thought you could be this ruthless." "You never really knew me," Dominic replied simply. "If you had, you might have anticipated this outcome." In the end, they signed. What choice did they have? Victoria left first, unable to look at either man. Bradley lingered at the door. "What happens now?" he asked, sounding older than his years. "You leave the country," Dominic replied. "The contract includes a non-compete clause effective worldwide. You never design another building. You never contact Victoria again. You disappear. And if I don't," Dominic smiled faintly, "then I finish what I started today. The choice is yours. But it's the only one you have left." After Bradley departed, Dominic stood alone in his apartment. Surveying the scattered papers and half-empty wine glasses, the victory felt exactly as he designed it. Not hot and violent, but cold and precise. Architectural in its perfection. His phone buzzed with a text from Naomi. "Heard Winters is leaving the country. Rumors of financial impropriety." "Comet," Dominic typed back. "Sometimes people build facades that eventually collapse under their own weight." 6 months later, Dominic stood on the rooftop terrace of the newly completed Archer Tower, watching the sunset paint the city gold dot, the revolutionary sustainable design. His design had already won international awards and changed building codes in 3 states. Lenora Archer joined him at the railing. "Beautiful, isn't it? Your vision made real." "It's always satisfying when a design is executed exactly as intended," Dominic replied. His phone buzzed again. A news alert. Victoria had filed for divorce from Bradley, who was living in obscurity in a small Portuguese coastal town. The final piece was falling into place. "Any regrets?" Lenora asked, studying his expression. Dominic considered the question. Thinking of the ruined lives he'd left in his wake, he thought of trust betrayed and love corrupted. He thought of the moment he'd stood in his destroyed garage, seeing years of deception laid bare. "No," he said finally. "Some structures need to be demolished before something better can be built in their place." As night fell over the city, Dominic remained on the rooftop alone, the architect of a perfect vengeance. Surrounded by the skyline he had always been destined to transform. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comment section. Thanks for your precious time. If you enjoyed this story, please make sure you subscribe to this channel.